But good afternoon. Hope y'all had a great break. Good lunch. Brett, Manish, and Tom, will you join me on the stage? All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. In this session, you're going to hear from security leaders in retail and hospitality who will discuss how passwordless authentication really is a business enabler that can improve enterprise operations and processes and really offer a frictionless consumer experience, all things that we've been talking about the last couple days. To start off, I would like to thank Brett Cumming of Skechers, Manish Gupta of Expedia, Tom Sheffield of Target for being our panelists today. My name is Kristen Dalton. I'm the Director of Strategic Engagement, Research, and Analytics with the Retail and Hospitality ISAC. And for those of you who are not familiar, the RH ISAC is a member-based association. So we have more than 250 companies across retail, hospitality, travel, CPG, who come together and share cyber threat intelligence. And they are working together to mature their information security programs through a number of different things. So that includes research, working groups, and events. And so our questions today will cover 4 main topics. That includes the state of identity and access management, rolling out passwordless for the enterprise, things that you can consider for rolling out on the consumer side, and key takeaways for you all this afternoon. But first, I would like to learn more about our panelists. So Manish, I will start with you. What is your current role and IAM responsibilities at your organization?
Sure, and thank you all for having us here. Before I go to formal introduction, there was an interesting incident last evening. So if you give me a few minutes, I would like to walk through because I think that will beautifully set the stage for the rest of our talk. So I was returning after a dinner and had some issue with my parking. So I went back to the hotel, and Teresa greeted me there and said, I can help. So she walked back to the computer, tried to help me with the parking. Looks like she was struggling, but I kind of patiently stood there. After a few minutes, she said, OK, I need to get some additional help, so I'm going back. Went back, came back with what looked like a manager kind of a person. She had a phone in her hand, started looking at the phone and speaking out some numbers, sounded like an OTP. So seemed like a login problem. Now I got really interested. I said, are you having login issues? Because right behind you, there's a whole party of hundreds of people who are identity experts and probably can help you. She turned around, looked at a bunch of people who had drinks in their hand. Some were already in the hot tub. Some were having really good fun. She turned around quickly, said, probably not a good suggestion. Meanwhile, luckily, with the OTP in hand, they were able to log in, fix my problem, send me away. But the reason I wanted to kind of start with that is that very beautifully encapsulates how when you're having in-person interactions and have the pressure of in-person interaction in a retail hospitality setting, how a few seconds saved in an authentication really matter, right? So that was like very beautifully came to light yesterday in that interaction, and I was at the receiving end. But if these things don't go right, you could either have a customer for life or you could lose a customer forever. So that has been kind of the theme with RH ISAC and IAM working group, which I am a co-chair for. And then I'm also a leader for identity management at Expedia, where I lead multiple facets of identity. Of course, traveler authentication is the big piece. But some of the other not so obvious things are leading partner authentications and identity management, our B2B use cases, and then also B2B2C use cases for our white label templates, and then finally workload authentication for our traveler API products. And Expedia is a large conglomerate of brands. So if you have not heard about Expedia as a travel company, you've probably heard about other brands like Hotels.com, VRBO, cheap tickets, car rentals, and so on. Turn it over to Tom for his introduction.
I am Tom Sheffield, Senior Director of Cybersecurity at Target, and I've been in our identity management program, or leading our identity management program, for about 7.5 years now in the Twin Cities. I'm also co-chair of the IAM working group with Manish here, and then active in IDSA and ID Pro and the FIDO Alliance as well.
Very cool. Hey everybody, Brett Cumming. I run the Global Information Security Program at Skechers. I've been with the company for 12 years and been leading that practice for the last 6, and identity is a part of what we do.
I do have to congratulate Brett publicly. He was recently voted CISO of the Year by his peers in the RHISAC community at our summit a couple weeks ago. Congratulations to Brett. But I do want to talk a little bit about the IAM working group that we do have at the RHISAC. Tom and Manish are co-chairs. This group has 450 individuals in the community. They meet every other month. And they cover many of the same topics that we've heard at this conference. Tom, what are your thoughts on how this group has grown over the past few years? Just this year alone, we've had 136 requests for information or questions from the group where peers ask each other, for feedback, helping out on different challenges or use cases, things like that. So it's a very active group. But what would you say that, how has this group grown over the last few years, and what would you like to see the group work towards next year?
Yeah, I think the biggest area of growth, besides the pure numbers, right, that's a great body of people that get together and share information with each other. It's the collaboration. At Target, we talk about security being a team sport, and our participation in events like this, our participation in the RHISAC is a way that we try and bring the community together and share the information, because we know the attackers are doing the same thing right now. So it's the best way to bring the whole industry forward. Over the last year and a half or so, it's really been neat to see the number of people raising questions, right, in those RFIs. We have a Slack community as well. If I compare our small community, what I could still consider a small community in the RHISAC, I would say the gold standard within the RHISAC is the threat intelligence and threat detection groups, right? They're sharing IOCs, sharing TTPs, they're sharing active threats that are going on in their environment. They are highly, highly collaborative. I aspire to be at that level. We're not as transactional, I think, as they need to be, but I think there's still a similar opportunity to collaborate in the same way. Externally, I look at ID Pro. I'm a member of ID Pro. Ian has often said that what ID Pro offers in Slack is the ultimate phone a friend. That there's somebody out there who's having done something, having a problem, somebody else has done it before or is doing it right now. So I think in the same way, we have a great opportunity to share all of our insights with each other. If you're working on that obscure product platform or product selection, somebody else has likely already done it, or can at least give you some insight to help you move forward. The biggest thing we ask of the members is silence is okay. If you're silent because you're unsure of sharing, feel free to share, feel open to share. If you're silent because you don't know and are embarrassed, it's better to ask the question. And so really collaboration is what I've seen grow this year or over the last 18 months, and I hope to see grow even more so next year.
Awesome. So Brett, this next question is for you, and we're going to get into now the state of identity and access management from our perspective. Specifically from the CISO perspective, why is IAM so important to your cybersecurity program, and what threats are you most concerned about?
Well, I love this question because it's a question to me about prioritization, which is something I spend a significant amount of time on. It's something I think my kind of opinion on it is that every single security program, every single security team has limited resources, and so the thing that kind of defines success and less success, I don't want to say anything harsher than that, but outsized success versus other things, is the allocation of those resources. So when it comes to making those decisions, there's a lot of different factors that play into that, but kind of the two main ones that are the biggest piece of that conversation are: where is the organization going, and how is the organization trying to use technology, and how are they using technology? And then where is the threat actor ecosystem going, and how are the adversaries trying to attack that technology? So I think over many years now, we've seen this move from traditional data center application infrastructure to distributed. It's SaaS, it's cloud, and with that transformation, we've seen the enforcement points, the protective controls that we have as an organization kind of shrink down and really emphasize the number one control which we do have, which is identity. And then also on the threat actor side, identity threats have been around forever. right? For as long as there have been identities. I think that piece of it, to me, in terms of why is this such an important conversation right now, as opposed to any other time that we've been talking about this risk and this concern, is what we've seen in, I would say, the last year and a half maybe. What we have observed is really an acceleration of threat actor capabilities, an acceleration of commoditization of frameworks and toolkits that allow threat actors to bypass what were strong authentication controls, what we have relied on for a lot of years, push-based authentication and SMS in some cases, stuff like that. So that's something that we've been observing in increasing frequency and increasing intensity. We've seen it all over the news. We've seen the stuff with Lapsus and Scattered Spider, and it's just the tempo has been increasing. We've reached that inflection point where these techniques are not the domain of experts and nation states. They're really available to anybody with a motivation, anybody with an interest. Anyone can go out there and access these capabilities, these toolkits, frameworks, evil proxy, adversary in the middle type stuff. They're very effective at bypassing those types of controls and very effective at exploiting identities. So it's, to me, those two halves of the conversation. It's where has technology gone and where do we see it continue to go? And additionally, that pressure we've seen from the threat actor ecosystem makes this a super relevant conversation, an area of focus and emphasis, I think, hopefully for all organizations right now.
So Manish, this next question is for you. As far as standards go, how has the FIDO Alliance improved security from an industry perspective, and how might this compare to other authentication methods that you've used in the past?
Yeah, it has been interesting over the years. Like, even though the fundamental definition for authentication comprising of 3 factors, right, that we all know, right, something you know, right, in your head, something you are, kind of your face or whatever, or something you have, like a watch, right? Those 3 fundamental things have not changed in the last however many years that this was defined. But using those 3 basic tenets, we have come up with so many different ways to authenticate over the years. It could be OTP-based, it could be push-based, like Brett just mentioned, or it could be knowledge-based, like passwords and PIN, or it could be some of the other biometric things, right? So these things, we keep coming up with more and more of these things. What has been unique with the approach that FIDO took is now there is an open industry alliance kind of driving the standard, first of all, right? So there's someone that's looking after, caring, and feeding for this thing, which is very unique. None of the other things that came up before this had that kind of a support. So be it usability, be it security, be it things around driving adoption or certification of vendors, all of those things, there's someone that is overseeing, which is very unique, and which is why, like when PASI was announced a couple of years ago, or almost 18 months ago, right, the adoption that we have seen has been so rapid because there is a driving force, there's an alliance that's driving that. So I think that has been the true change compared to previous authentication attempts and this. And of course, the standard itself was very well thought through. It takes care of usability and security balance that we have always been striving for. So that, of course, helps. But I think it's just how it was approached in like going back to a clean slate and then coming up with a really well thought out approach.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Tom, what's been your impression of the user experience, FIDO's user experience? Are there any key differences or improvements that you've seen with the introduction of passkeys?
Yeah, I mean, at its very nature, right, passkeys was created, the idea of a passkey was created for, to reach global scale, right? The idea of telling a user, your mother and father, your aunt and uncle, your grandmother or grandfather, for example, to go out and get 2 security keys was never going to scale the way that it needed to. So the idea of a passkey itself is fundamentally a shift in terms of getting to that global scale. So that alone, I think, is the biggest difference that we've seen with the FIDO Alliance over the last couple of years. Beyond that, it really comes down to our implementations of solutions around the use of and the registration of passkeys. And so, for example, the FIDO Alliance, within the FIDO Alliance, there's a user experience working group that's made up of a number of organizations who collectively put together the first white paper this summer on how to effectively get users to get registered into the flow. And that's the first of likely multiple white papers because there's so many other use cases and entry points that we haven't even addressed yet. So it's really exciting to see what the FIDO Alliance, kind of to Manisha's point, there's somebody overseeing this that's investing and helping all of us be successful, because when we're all successful, our users will all be successful and safe simultaneously.
So these next sets of questions is about rolling out passwordless program for the enterprise. Tom, we'll stick with you on this one. What can you tell us about Target's enterprise rollout? When did you start? Where are you now? And what employees did you focus on first, and why?
So our FIDO journey started back in 2019. It started as a hackathon. It was my engineers deciding, what could we do around authentication with FIDO. They had been doing their own due diligence on FIDO. At the time, there wasn't a lot of open source alternatives, and there wasn't even a lot of commercial alternatives yet for FIDO. So we decided to write our own FIDO server. Actually went through the certification process and are now certified through the FIDO Alliance with a FIDO certified server that's been running in our environment since that launch date, 4.5 years ago now, I guess it is. And so our first deployment of FIDO was supporting FIDO security keys. Again, this was before Apple joined the Alliance, and so we had Microsoft and Google out in front. But we knew as an organization that really rolling this out to our enterprise was going to struggle until we had the full ecosystem covered, and Mapple's entry in 2020 really opened the door for that. So in 2021, we launched our enterprise support for FIDO. I spoke about that at Authenticate 2022, if you want to go check out that video, just to see some of the things that we did. But that was really the first time we launched. So 2.5 years later, we have a full rollout across our environment. The beauty of Target is we have a very robust SSO environment. Almost every one of our applications, web applications in Target, is integrated into our SSO platform. So when we launched FIDO on day one, it covered every employee naturally. By very nature of having SSO, it was fully available. We leverage platform authenticators on all of our devices. We support FIDO security keys, but don't actually provide any today. By choice, don't really want to get in the overhead of managing them. And we've also been investing in capable devices with platform authenticators. So over the last 2.5 years, we continue to see an uptick in registrations. Just this year, late last year, early this year, we rolled out support for passkeys across a couple of those providers as well. So we're now supporting passkeys in our environment at the same time.
And what metrics did you track, and did those metrics change during the course of the rollout? Did more things become more important or less important over time?
Yeah, so when we started, we were tracking 4 different metrics, and what we ultimately realized was 2 became very, very important to us. One is a count of registrations over a period of time, and the goal is to see that graph continue to rise. We want more people to continue to adopt, and until we reach full rollout, full coverage, there's always more opportunity to grow. So that curve going upward is an important metric to us. And then the second metric is usage. So once you have it, are you still using it? So the other metric we calculate is the number of authentications, password versus passwordless. And again, we want that number to increase as well, because that means that people are using the technology still. And you can be registered for it, but if you're not using it, we didn't do a darn thing. And so our job is to make sure that we're creating experiences that people want to use. And I think we've been able to do that, again, because we're SSO enabled. There are a small number of apps that maybe weren't plugged into our SSO environment yet. And we've had users go up to their product teams that own those applications and say, why can't I log in with my fingerprint? Why can't I log in with my biometric, my face or otherwise? So it's really become sort of a grassroots effort now. Sometimes our users are asking for it when they're not already covered, which is kind of a third measure of success that we didn't intend, but it's always great to see.
Mm-hmm. And Brett, you're rolling out Windows Hello, which is a certified FIDO2 authenticator. What has your journey been like so far?
Well, Tom was mentioning some of the hesitation around the operational overhead of managing the physical keys, and we have been using those in a very focused use case for a lot of years. And it was always a barrier for us, considering, well, what does this look like at enterprise scale? How are we going to manage this? Matching that to what we thought the risk was, and comparing that to the benefit and the overhead and those things. And so it had been a process for a long time for very specific high sensitivity use cases. We got physical keys for those applications and those individuals. But really, to me, it was about hitting a point of critical mass. And some of those elements were the underlying hardware, the platform authenticators, the fact that the biometrics are baked into a lot of the devices. Years ago, it was something that you had to maybe special order if you wanted to get it, but now, it's kind of part of the default that's being deployed in a lot of organizations. So the accessibility of the underlying technology, the fact that that was already there, the sort of native integration into the other platforms and authentication systems we were already using. If you're a Microsoft shop, if you got Office 365, Windows Hello, if you're running Windows operating systems, like it's all part of that ecosystem. And so the accessibility of the capability was really kind of the key thing that put us over the edge. And then again, wanting to make sure that we're continuing to advance and match what our risk and threat profile is. So all of those things, I think pretty recently have kind of gotten to a point where we felt, hey, all of these are in the right point. The operational overhead is low, the risk is high. That means that the benefit of deploying this is also going to be high. So it was that kind of critical mass for us that got us to that point. And going forward, it's just kind of like Tom was saying, where are the additional use cases, where are the applications that maybe aren't already integrated with single sign-on, where are those other places we can kind of extend and go forward from there.
Mm-hmm. So Manish, you've rolled out passwordless authentication at multiple organizations. Can you tell me about your respective journeys?
Yeah, so just like Tom and Brett have mentioned, passwordless authentication rollouts are always interesting. I have been fortunate to roll it out multiple times now. And we'll talk about two of them, one in an employee context, another in a B2B or partner context, right? So in our employee context, this was a rollout across about 500,000 users across 3 continents, primarily Americas, Europe, and Asia. And the complexity, just because of the scale, was there. But there were other complexities that are true to the retail environment, like shared devices or availability of the phone near to the work area, things like that. And then also complexity of different environments, like apart from retail, we have to also deal with manufacturing. Of course, the office workers and IT staff was there. So just the diversity presented some challenges. In that case, just because of the timing of that rollout, we went with the push to accept solution. And the very first hurdle we ran into, apart from others, this was the most significant one, is probably a few weeks into it, we had not a significant, but we had an incident wherein we were subject to push bombing kind of an attack. And so luckily, when we were developing this, we had already developed both a simple push to accept and also a push that requires you to select a character, match it to what is on your web page or application to what shows up on your phone. So we were quickly able to pivot, but it was very clear that these things have their gotchas as you roll them out, and the balance between usability and security was very evident with that example. So that was one. It took us almost 2 years because we went in a methodical way because this involved a lot of different retail stores, and we didn't want to blast it out everywhere at the same time. So from the first launch to the first pilot set of users to the final rollout to the last store, it was about a 2-year journey. The second use case was also retail related. And in this case, we were dealing with employees who were not our own employees, but third-party employees because of the stores being part of other umbrella stores, and these were like small stores within that. So in this case, the employees that we were dealing with, most of them did not have an email, a corporate email, or did not have access to phone. So we had to really scratch our head as to how we solve that problem. And in this case, we went with a behavioral authentication solution, which was based on typing pattern. And it might seem gimmicky, like as identity professionals, right? There's not a standard-based solution. But sometimes based on the business use case, you have to select these things because it did fit this use case where people don't have an email to bootstrap the account. They don't have access to phones, right? So some of these other factors. So this kind of a behavioral typing pattern-based solution did work out. So those have been my 2 experiences kind of in 2 different space.
Excellent. So now we're going to transition into the future state and what to consider for a consumer rollout. Manish, we'll stick with you on this. What do you feel are the biggest business and security advantages that passwordless authentication could provide to consumers? How would this change their shopping experience?
Yeah. So as we have heard repeatedly over the last 3 days, right, and some real stories of passwordless rollout to customer populations, right? So I was involved in one of them, again, a non-FIDO passwordless rollout. But in that case, like what's very clear is customers do prefer, given an option, they gravitate towards a non-passwordless solution. In our case, this rollout, just because of how we set up the UI and the experience, within no time, we saw 90% reduction in password-based usage for our customers. And that was huge. Like we were not expecting that we will get that high watermark so quickly. But it clearly outlined that customers prefer it. And it's because of all the reasons that we have talked about, right? The usability is great for passwordless solution. The speed is great. We also get more security, all right, especially if you're rolling out something phishing resistant like a FIDO2, a passkey solution. So all of those advantages, and then it's ultimately leads to a better customer experience, which finally translates into a customer doing the checkout that what we are after, right? In a retail context, converting the customer from landing on the website to finally completing the sale and hitting that final submit button is the ultimate thing that we are after. And the less dropouts we have in that funnel from the first land on the website to final checkout, that's really the ultimate measure. So in our case, at least with this limited passwordless rollout, it did work out, and that's typically what you are looking for and striving for.
Nice. So Brett, we did talk a little bit about the user experience on the employee side, but what do you think could be done to improve the ease of use and the security for consumers?
Well, this is the fun part of the conversation, because so much of what we do in information security is about adding friction, it's about adding controls, it's about trying to sell people on the idea of why they need to do something that diverts them from some other thing they're focused on. And so anytime we can talk about something that is a benefit to the security posture, but also a benefit to the usability, I think it's just it's a fun conversation to have, and I really enjoy having them. And that's the conversation that I think we get to have specifically in the authentication space when we talk about these more modern authentication protocols and ones that are both easier to use and more secure. So from that perspective, it's definitely something that there's interest in, on the consumer side. Anything that we can do to make that experience faster, easier, more seamless, more diverse options, really whatever an individual consumer's preference is, the more we can empower them to do things in the way they want to do it. And if we can do that and at the same time get a security benefit, then that's just, again, putting a smile on my face.
So Tom, what challenges do you see on the consumer side? We did talk about the advantages and the benefits, but any challenges that you foresee? What types of consumer education in particular might be necessary?
Yeah, I think the biggest one right now, as Andrew's, if you were here for Andrew's opening keynote, right, we're at that tipping point right now. And I think the biggest one that we have right in front of us is that awareness. And I was really happy to see Andrew's number. I think it was 52% of consumers that were polled recognized what a passkey was. And that, I think, is a great statistic. That long way to go to get to 100%. But I think collectively, again, all of our efforts are going to help continue to increment that number. Beyond that, there's still some conversations around privacy. A couple weeks ago, when Google made their announcement, I was watching my morning newscast, my local NBC station, and they did a feature story in the 6 o'clock news. After the anchors sort of do the story, they were heading into a break, so they were doing a little bit of banter, and there was a comment made by one of the anchors around, I don't know if I want them having access to my biometrics. And that's like the biggest thing, the biggest myth we have to dispel, is that the biometrics never leave the device. It's the same thing you're comfortable with using. If you unlock your phone, it's the same action and the same security there. So I wanted to find the newscast, right? I wanted to reach out to the anchor and say, hey, like let's correct this, but it probably wasn't my place to do so. But I think that's the biggest opportunity we have going forward, is just help people understand that this is privacy preserving by design, and that is something that they should really care about in a positive way.
We have seen a lot of big companies as early adopters. What has made that successful? What's something that might allow for a more critical mass adoption on the consumer side?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit before, but I think the biggest thing is the fact that we have the technologies in place, that foundation's in place. Again, that's why we're at this tipping point. There's not a technical barrier right now that I think should stop anybody from moving forward. I think there are still some rough edges. There's still some things we're all figuring out collectively. But the work that we're doing within the FIDO Alliance, the work that the early adopters are doing to get out there, Amazon, Google, with hundreds of millions of users, Target, my 400,000 team members don't sound like a lot, but it's 400,000 more people that recognize a FIDO passkey logo and what it means to them when they're logging into Target. And if they can make that connection and carry that to their personal lives, that's one more opportunity for them to sign up on the next RP that they're a member of or they're a user of. And so I think it's really about getting them aware of where we're going, and having that awareness is really, really the key.
So we are moving into our final section, which is the key takeaways for all of you. If we have some time, I believe we'll take some questions from the audience. So start thinking about those. But Brett, what kinds of leadership conversations are you having around passwordless technologies, if any, and how are you educating those key stakeholders in your organization?
Definitely not getting into the details of platform versus roaming authenticators. Certainly not getting into those weeds. But it's a good story. And kind of like I was just talking about, the messaging around where it's important for us to apply our resources, where we need to be taking action to help protect the organization, and where we can take action to help protect the consumers. That's a good narrative. And that element of it where it doesn't have to be a conversation about trade-off, or it doesn't have to be that conversation. Well, we really need to do this, even though it's going to negatively impact, the customer experience or the employee experience, whatever the case. Having that conversation, saying, "Hey, this is something that's important to do for these risk mitigation reasons, and also it's going to give us these other benefits." That just makes the conversation a lot easier, and tying into those, high-level objectives, the things that folks really care about strategically, things like the customer satisfaction and those items, I think helps tell the conversation as well, and makes it a successful one.
Any particular piece of advice for anyone in the audience who might be in a similar position having those conversations?
Only the general advice, which is always know your audience. Always know your audience and tailor the message accordingly.
So Manish, how has the move to passwordless enabled the businesses that you've been a part of? How can folks here work with their business leaders and their organizations?
Yeah, good question. I think as I went through multiple journeys for passwordless, right, I would try and break it down into three parts as you're trying to gather momentum within your organization. First thing is, like Tom mentioned, right, only 52% understand passkeys right now, are aware of it. So first thing you should do is educate, right? There is a lot of education needed internally, and please don't start these efforts by saying that we are going to go passwordless, right? That's the last thing you want. Come up with some other name for this effort, because one, at the end of this effort, probably for foreseeable future, you won't be passwordless. Other people have very different definitions of passwordless in their head. So the moment you key in on that term, you kind of already have to over-explain yourself later, and sometimes once people have formed an opinion, it's very difficult to make them budge from it. So rather than they forming an opinion, come up with a different name and try to educate them through different means, but key in based on the audience, like Brett mentioned, key in the message, right? Whether you're talking to legal, whether you're talking privacy, whether you're talking to marketing or your rewards team, right? Whoever it is, because there is something in it for everyone. And if you highlight that relevant message, you will get further. And then take advantage of, because this is such a quick thing, right? So if you have your mock-ups, right, you can always build an elevator pitch or walking deck that you can run through someone within few minutes, right? So you don't even need a full hour of meeting with someone, but have those things ready so that people are trying to understand your story rather than building a story in their own head based on just the term passwordless. So that's first. Second would be assume the role of a seller, right? Learn from all the vendors that are on the floor here, or take the help from the material that they are producing. But you have to sell this within your organization. You have to sell it up to your own hierarchy. You have to sell it across to your peers, not just within IT, but across the organization. And then you have to, of course, sell down to your team, and they have to be energized. Don't assume that because they work in IT, they are all caught up and know about these things. Just like I said, people have different perceptions of passwordless in their head. So make sure you bring all of those factions along. And again, as you're meeting with them, try to hone in on the message that resonates with them. When you're meeting with cybersecurity, talk about phishing resistant solution that you're going to bring in, but don't talk about phishing resistant when you're talking to your loyalty team, right? They are more concerned with, are they going to increase their loyalty enrollments, right? So talk about how that happens with improved usability and with the fast time to sign up or easier to log in. So that's second. And then the last thing is you have to make sure that you promise what you can deliver. So typically, especially when we are in selling mode, we have a habit of over-promising, right, and being very aggressive with the dates when we can achieve things, and making statements like within the next 12 months, we will be like completely out of passwords. So avoid those statements before you start making commitment. Talk to your team, come up with realistic estimates, and then try to stick to those estimates. Have frequently arriving milestones in that journey that you can frequently celebrate those wins, and have measurements pre-decided that you will measure through the journey so that that win is based on numbers and you can clearly articulate or pivot back if you run into issues, right? So I think those would be my three-prong approach as you're kind of approaching this.
Those are excellent takeaways. Tom, you've got the final word here. Why is now the time for organizations to adopt FIDO? And specifically, why is retail and hospitality poised to be leaders in the passwordless space? So where should organizations start?
Yeah, so I'll begin by saying I'm obviously very, very biased. As an early adopter, as a member of the FIDO Alliance, as a vice chair of the EDWG, working for enterprise adoption capabilities, this is the time, right? I mentioned before, the ecosystem's ready, the platform providers, the passkey providers are all ready. We're at that tipping point. It's our collective efforts as you go back to the office either later this week or next week if you're taking a longer weekend to enjoy the weather here in San Diego. When you go back, figure out what you can do first, and then second, and then third, but don't try and do the second, thirds yet, but have an idea where you want to go. I think from a retail and hospitality perspective, the biggest thing that we're going to bring to the table is that reach, right? You know, every user is a consumer in some way, shape, or form, and so if we're able to get out there and get in front of the users, we're one more opportunity for them to become familiar with or understand what a passkey is. So if you're a retailer in the room, I would encourage you to again, take that first step. If you're not a retailer, again, take that first step. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't take the first step. If you think you're waiting for something, I don't really know what you'd be waiting for right now. There may be some very specific nuanced things in your environment, but again, I still think you can do some proofs of concepts. You can work on your MVP. You can begin learning about it, investing your time in innovation time, hackathon time, discovery time, whatever it may be. Just get involved. Just get out there and do something to take that first step, because the second step's so much easier if you take the first one first.
Excellent. Well, that wraps up our panel discussion for this afternoon. Are there any questions for Brett, Tom, or Manish? Yes.
Easy.
Sorry, I couldn't see you.
Just go ahead and ask a question. We'll repeat it.
So how do you envision a truly passwordless future, i.e. where we don't use passwords as a fallback in case of lost passkey or whatever?
So the question was, how do you envision a future without passwords as even a fallback? I would say I'm not even thinking about that future yet, to be honest. Right? It is so far in advance, so far away, that I don't want to become a distraction for where I am today. So speaking from our organization specifically, we were very clear early on that we are not going to eliminate the passwords on day one. I have a hope to in the future, but there's a lot of extenuating circumstances that may make that harder to achieve or hard to achieve. And so if I try and solve that problem today, it's going to detract us from getting done the things that we can get done. And so we purposely tabled that one until we're ready to tackle it.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Tom said, there could be specific use cases where you want that higher level of security and assurance, where you may want to get rid of password and only go with, say, hardware-based keys, right? And so if that's the use case you're after, yeah, it makes sense. But like for a retailer who's trying to sell something and there is a competitor next door who's trying to sell the same thing again, you don't want to take steps which will kill your business, right? So you have to be pragmatic about this. And like you said, be ready to measure the ultimate business gain you're getting, right? If you're talking to consumers, and if your revenue starts to go down because you implemented really secure thing, then there won't be a business to run very soon. So, but there is place for that, and in those cases, yeah, happily implement no password solutions.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
So how do you manage the life cycle of the passkeys today for your internal employees?
Yeah, so the question was, how do we manage a lifecycle passkeys for our employees today, and are we concerned about keys getting synced? We handle a passkey, right? We grab the public key of the user during the registration process and put it in our passkey or FIDO credential database, right, with the credential ID and the other information that we collect. We handle that just like any other termination event. So as I terminate a user today, we disable or delete their Active Directory account. We do the same thing to their passkey. So even if they kept a local key, even with a local key on a local device or synced up to their sync fabric, the key is completely worthless because we've already taken care of eliminating the public key on our side. So when they present it, there's nothing that can compare to and validate against. So it's a dead transaction to us.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to our panelists and to the FIDO Alliance for a great conference so far this week. Thank you.